There are two neighbors on the same street, same block, same zip code, similar houses, same general income range. One drives a 3-year-old Toyota. The other drives a brand new luxury SUV, fresh off the lot. From the outside, the second neighbor looks wealthier. But here's the part that will completely rearrange how you see money. At 55, the first neighbor quietly retired. The second one is still going into an office every single day, trying to figure out how they're going to afford the next decade of their life. Same income, completely different destinations. The only real difference? It wasn't luck. It wasn't inheritance. It wasn't even discipline in the way most people talk about discipline. It was something far more invisible and far more powerful. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what it is and why almost nobody talks about it this way. Welcome to Noah Invests. Let's get into it. Most people, when they hear savers versus spenders, immediately picture two types of personalities. The frugal person who clips coupons and never enjoys life, and the fun-loving spender who lives in the moment. That's the story we've been told, and it's almost completely wrong. The real divide between savers and spenders isn't about personality. It isn't about willpower, or sacrifice, or who suffers more. It's actually about a deeply misunderstood relationship with time. Specifically, what economists call time preference, the degree to which you value something right now versus something in the future. And here's what makes this so fascinating. Most people don't even know they have a time preference. They just act on it every single day in ways that are slowly, quietly compounding into two very different financial destinies. A 2023 Federal Reserve report found that nearly 37% of American adults would struggle to cover an unexpected $400 expense using cash or savings. Not $4,400. Meanwhile, the top 10% of wealth holders in the United States now control roughly 67% of the total household wealth in this country. The gap isn't growing slowly, it's accelerating. And the reason most people don't notice it happening to them personally is because it moves in silence. One small financial decision at a time. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Studies in behavioral economics show that the same brain regions activated when you feel physical pain are also activated when you feel the pain of paying for something. Spending money, on a neurological level, actually hurts. So the brain developed a clever workaround. It removes friction from purchases. It creates mental shortcuts that make spending feel normal, necessary, even logical. Buy now, pay later. 0% interest for 12 months. One-click checkout. These aren't just convenient features. They're engineered systems designed to lower the psychological cost of spending, and they work brilliantly, but only for the companies offering them. The average American household carries over $7,000 in credit card debt. Not mortgage debt. Not student loans, just revolving, high-interest credit card debt. And the average interest rate on that debt as of early 2024 was hovering above 21%. Think about what that means for a moment. If you have $7,000 in credit card debt at 21% interest, and you're only making minimum payments, you're not building wealth. You're actively funding someone else's. The bank is compounding against you while you're trying to compound for yourself. And the tragic part is that most people in that situation don't feel like they're losing. They feel like they're managing. That word, managing, might be one of the most financially dangerous words in the English language, because managing implies control. It implies you're on top of it. But what it often really means is that you're surviving at a level that feels stable, while the gap between you and actual financial freedom gets quietly wider every month. Now here's the insight that most personal finance content completely skips over. Saving money and building wealth are not the same thing. They're related, but they're not identical. And the people who confuse the two end up making a critical mistake that costs them years, sometimes decades, of compounding growth. Think about someone who saves $500 a month faithfully, puts it in a savings account, feels good about it because they're doing the right thing, but that savings account is earning 0.5% interest. Meanwhile, inflation is running somewhere between 3% and 4%. In real terms, that money is shrinking every year it sits there. The habit is right. The vehicle is wrong. And the difference between those two outcomes, over 20 years, can be measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the hidden fracture line between people who save and people who actually build wealth. The wealthy don't just save, they deploy. Every dollar that comes and gets assigned a job. Some goes to living expenses, yes, but a meaningful percentage gets placed into assets, index funds, real estate, businesses, retirement accounts, things that work while the owner sleeps. The average saver accumulates. The wealth builder compounds. And compounding, as anyone who's run the numbers knows, is not linear. It's geometric. metric. It bends upward. It accelerates over time in a way that genuinely feels unfair if you start late. Let me give you a number that never stops being stunning no matter how many times you see it. If you invest $500 a month starting at age 25, and you earn a 7% average annual return, which is below the historical average of the S&P 500, you'll have approximately $1.3 million by age 65. Start that same investment at age 35 instead of 25, same amount, same return, and you end up with around $600,000. 10 years, same discipline, same monthly amount, $700,000 difference. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a retirement you look forward to and a retirement you're afraid of. Now let's talk about spending, because this is where the psychology gets really interesting, and where most advice completely misses the point. The common narrative is that spenders lack discipline, but the research suggests something more nuanced. In a 2019 study published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology, participants consistently underestimated how much they spent on small, recurring purchases, coffee, subscriptions, convenience fees, while accurately tracking large, deliberate purchases like rent or car payments. The problem isn't reckless spending on big things. It's unconscious spending on small things. The financial death by 1,000 cuts that nobody's auditing. There's a concept in behavioral finance called hedonic adaptation. It means that no matter how much you upgrade your lifestyle, you rapidly adjust to the new normal and return to roughly the same baseline level of satisfaction. The new car stops feeling new after 3 months. The bigger apartment stops feeling luxurious after 6. But the payments? Those don't adapt. They stay exactly where they are. And this is the trap that keeps millions of Americans perpetually upgrading their lifestyle without ever upgrading their net worth. The wealthy figured this out, not through superior willpower, but through a different mental model. They learned to derive satisfaction from net worth growth rather than lifestyle displays. When a wealthy person sees their investment portfolio increase by $30,000 in a year, they feel the same emotional reward that a lifestyle spender feels when they buy a new car. The dopamine hit is the same. The financial outcome is radically different. And this isn't just theoretical. It's backed by research from Thomas Stanley and William Danko in their landmark work studying actual millionaires, most of whom lived in ordinary neighborhoods, drove ordinary cars, and would be completely invisible to you on the street. The flashiest people in your social circle are frequently not the wealthiest. That's not cynicism. That's a pattern. Visible wealth and actual wealth are two entirely different things, and the gap between them is often funded by debt. Here's another pattern that almost nobody talks about. The psychological principle of social comparison, our tendency to evaluate our own financial standing by looking at the people around us, is one of the single biggest drivers of poor financial decisions in America. When your coworker buys a boat, something in your brain registers a quiet alarm. Not because you actually want a boat, but because the gap between what you have and what they have suddenly feels like a statement about you. And that feeling, that social anxiety disguised as desire, is responsible for an enormous percentage of the debt that American households carry. The average American spends roughly $1.5 trillion per year on non-essential goods and services. And a significant portion of that spending happens not because people genuinely want those things, but because buying them feels like a way of keeping up with a status signal they didn't consciously choose to care about. Wealthier households systematically ignore those signals, not because they don't feel the pull, they do, but because they've replaced the emotional reward of buying things with the emotional reward of watching their assets grow. That shift in psychology, from consumption-driven satisfaction to accumulation-driven satisfaction, is arguably the most important financial transformation a person can make, and it almost never gets talked about in terms of what it actually is, a rewiring of what feels good. Let's bring this home, because here's the realization that I want to sit with you for a moment. The wealth gap between savers and spenders isn't really about money. It's about meaning. What you assign meaning to. What makes you feel secure, successful, respected, and alive. For most people in this country, consumer culture has quietly answered those questions for them, and the answer always involves buying something. Every advertisement, every influencer post, every curated lifestyle on social media is communicating the same message. You are not enough yet, but you could be if you had this. And the people who escape that trap, the people who quietly, steadily build real wealth, aren't more disciplined. They're more awake. They've recognized the game being played, and they've decided not to participate in it on those terms. They're playing a different game entirely. One where the scoreboard isn't in your driveway or on your wrist. It's in a brokerage account that most of their neighbors will never see. That's the quiet divide. Not between rich and poor. Between awake and asleep. The first step is almost always the hardest. Not because it requires a lot of money, but because it requires you to look at your own financial behavior honestly and ask, am I accumulating? Or am I just managing? Am I building? Or am I performing? Those are uncomfortable questions. But the people who ask them, and answer them honestly, are the ones who end up somewhere completely different in 20 years. You now understand the real psychology behind why the wealth gap keeps widening. You understand the compounding math that makes starting early non-negotiable. You understand the trap of hedonic adaptation, social comparison, and the difference between saving and actually deploying capital. That's not surface-level information. That's the framework that separates financial confusion from financial clarity. Here's the question I want you to sit with and answer in the comments below. Right now, is your money accumulating, or is it deployed? Are you holding dollars in a savings account that inflation is quietly eroding, or are those dollars working somewhere that compounds in your direction? Drop your honest answer below. It's not a judgment, it's a starting point. And if you want more of this, deeper dives into the real psychology and mechanics of wealth building, the things most channels won't take the time to actually explain, then subscribe to Noah Invests. Because the most valuable thing you can do right now isn't just to feel motivated. It's to stay informed, stay awake, and keep thinking differently about money than the people around you. That gap compounds too.